Welcome to the Path of Passion podcast, the podcast where we meet people whose lives bring them joy, who are pursuing paths they love. I am your host, Jordan, and this is my gorgeous co-host.
And returning, your gorgeous co-host, Tyler.
And today we are interviewing Robert, but also Fro. Either way works. So Fro runs an escape room in Boston, and having gone there myself a few times, it's a lot of fun. It's pretty ingenuitive in how you have to solve the problems, which actually our starting question for you. How did going to an engineering school lead you to being like a puzzle room creator?
It's definitely a winding path, but fundamentally engineering and like puzzle creation, not that far afield, especially in the realm of MIT, where there is such a strong puzzling community with things like the MIT Mystery Hunt. It's surprisingly second nature. But yeah, my path from engineering was that I was always interested in interactives and, live action games and theater, especially the technical side of theater. That was something I was very passionate about doing in my spare time. And then kind of one thing led to another, and eventually I was emailing escape rooms in the Boston area looking for work, and I came across this one. And it turns out I knew my co-owner, Victor, from taking mechie classes in college and also theater classes. He had the same idea, and yeah, the rest is history.
So then, did Victor make Boxaroo first, and then you joined, or was it you guys? Okay.
Yeah, essentially, Victor had started Boxaroo in 2016. Oh God, what is time? I want to say April 2016. That's when the Mystery of the Magician study opened. I joined late that year, December 2016, and ended up moving into a leadership position there. And we went on to build our second room, which opened in 2018. That's the Conundrum Museum. Then we've kept doing things ever since.
Very cool. So I assume Victor had a lot of say in the first escape the room. Was the second one like a equal collaboration between you guys, or what is, I guess, the process, and who's designing what in the rooms?
For sure. Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely a team effort, right? Boxaroo is a collaborative, it's a team. Victor, at the time was leading the design team. So, the theme was a museum, an art gallery where things are going to go wrong. And so then it's a matter of curating puzzle ideas from the rest of our, friends, volunteers, staff, things like that. And then, it's a bit more into our, specialities in terms of who's doing what. I can design some of the mechanisms and, some of the more mechanical side of things. Victor is a computer scientist, graphic design person. So he would deal with the branding and programming the room to run on our software. And as we kept going, we kept adding more and more people. Fantastic carpenter who builds all of the things, also an MIT graduate. And more people to help with the electronics side of things, the programming, and just, yeah, that's how we kept building things out.
Something I just realized that we should have probably touched on just a bit sooner. Can you explain just really quickly what an escape room is for anyone who hasn't been to it before?
Right. That's a very good question. Obviously, you know what an escape room is. In fact, you've been to some of ours, you mentioned. But the way I like to define an escape room is that you and a group of friends, colleagues, or family are going to go into a room. And in that room, you are going to be solving puzzles, collecting clues, and eventually trying to complete a story. And that, ends with you getting out of the room, usually. Uh, so, but this can vary, has a pretty wide umbrella, right? We have one room called the Conundrum Museum. It's an art gallery. As I mentioned, something goes wrong when you're there and you have to fix everything. Some art gets stolen. You have to find it. I see a ferocious nodding. It seems like, I'm guessing you've played that one.
Yeah, I did that one. It was a lot of fun. The final puzzle we struggled with, but it was really rewarding once we got it. I loved it.
Yep. So that's kind of that element there of we, want the room to have a story. We want all of the puzzles to be connected to the theme and tie into the story, and solving them gives you a feeling of progression within that environment that we're creating. We want it to be immersive and magical feeling with effects and stuff that makes it feel more real. And, ultimately it's just a great fun way to spend an hour and get to bond with some people that you might not otherwise get to experience.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I've been exposed to these just because a lot have popped up in the area since college. So I have gone and there have been events that happened at school where I was like taken to them, and it was awesome. And now that I know they exist, I go to them frequently. Not as much during COVID, but like try and get back into it. So, how did you first find out about this? Like, this isn't a path that I grew up thinking like this is something possible. How did you find out about it?
Yeah, definitely. This was not something that I thought about. I didn't grow up with and didn't think like, oh yeah, this is the thing during my lifetime. It is wild in many ways, reflecting back to think, oh yeah, if you had asked me 10 years ago, told me about the concept of escape room, I would have said that's cool, but I've never heard of it. So my experience immediately out of college, I had a summer job working at a museum exhibit design firm. So they created both the standard, here's a display with all of the information about a given topic for the museum. But also here's some interactives, games that people are playing, things like that. So it was a very interesting experience. And then, but their focus was always kind of on education first, information first, and then the fun aspect secondary. So I kind of wanted to follow up on that with, well, what if the first goal was the entertainment, right? Additionally, I had also had some association with the company Five Wits. I did basically a 1 semester internship with them, and it was pretty formative. And they're doing like the escape room concept, but their own version of it. And they were doing it basically before anyone else in the US. So, and at that point, mid 2016, I was like, hey, this seems like a thing. I'm going to see if anyone's hiring, especially for somebody with like an engineering skill set who's interested in doing more of this. And one of them got back to me, and it just happened to work out.
So I'm not sure what your family, friends, community is like, but how did they respond to you saying like, I'm going to go do this thing that hasn't happened in the US before?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can speak definitely to my friends have been nothing but fantastically supportive. And, while a lot of them were in many ways got to experience it on the ground floor with me, right? It's like, hey, I need to learn what an escape room is. Who wants to come and do this with me? And having, a number of friends who were into that sort of puzzle solving aspect, and like a, fantastic partner who loved solving puzzles. It was like, great, we can go explore this together. And it's been incredibly supportive having that. Family, I believe the very first time I mentioned this to my dad, he was like, what? That's not a thing. And then I remember I went home for Thanksgiving beforehand, and I had found a book which was about how to build an escape room, and not just how to build the actual room, but how to build an escape room business as part of it. So it focused mostly on design, but it was also like, these are the other things to think about with that. And I had read it. I finished it over Thanksgiving, and he saw I was reading it. He's like, oh, I guess you want to take this seriously. Can I borrow that book after you? And afterwards, yeah, he was pretty convinced. And so my family's been incredibly supportive ever since.
That's awesome. That's great.
So then has your family been to any of your escape rooms then, or?
They have in fact played all of the escape rooms we currently have. They did our online one, our online puzzle hunt that we produced during COVID times when we were shut down. They haven't been up for any of our large live events yet, but at this point, we'll see when they start making a comeback, and we'd love to get them up for that sometime.
I was going to ask with the pandemic. So you mentioned you moved to doing an online puzzle with possibly the pandemic extending. Are you guys thinking about doing a second online puzzle, or what's kind of the plans for the future right now?
Yeah, definitely for the time being, we're, continuing to run our rooms as safe as we can, both for our staff and for guests. We think escape rooms, especially in small groups that are vaccinated, that have, a bubble and a community they trust, that's great. Also, escape rooms tend to be, classified as one of the riskier things by the state here in Massachusetts. So if things start having to shut down, I'm sure we will be the first for whatever reason. So, if that happens again, when that maybe happens again, we will see. We want to look at other online things. We want to look at other at-home versions of play, things like the escape room in a box model, but with our sort of twist on it.
Yeah, that's really, I've seen some of it's like almost like a board game you open and there's an online element, and you're like, that seems really cool. That's definitely I've gone to escape rooms, but I've yet to take the plunge into that board game take at home escape the box.
There's definitely some, really cool space in the board game is a good word for it. The escape room board game version. I've played the two leading ones commercially for that, which are Unlocked, and I think it's Exit the Game was the other one. And it's, interesting. It's a good system that they have there, and that's really, I think, pulling from the board game side of things. We at this point now have some experience in designing and making, small scale interactables and props that, we have to immediately hand into people's hands, not just necessarily in the environment of the escape room, but in wherever customers are playing it. So, the idea of, could we repurpose that into something physical that people would take into their own homes? Could we transfer those skills there? But also, what kind of stories do we want to tell? Something in that realm, another online thing. There's many different options at this point that we want to look into.
Yeah, I've actually, in the kind of startup world, I've heard of some businesses who are doing ongoing mysteries, not necessarily puzzles, but mystery problems where new information gets trickled out every week, every 2 weeks, and you have to solve the puzzle over time. So there are a lot of opportunities in the space.
Absolutely, yeah.
But one thing I want to touch on relating to something earlier. So obviously, COVID surprised everyone and sucked pretty much across the board. But more broadly on that subject of unexpected setbacks, what has been your like the way you explained your start leaving college? It didn't seem like you were going straight to being business owner. So, what have been some unexpected parts of running your own business?
Oh, there's been a lot of them. And, I will say, especially for escape rooms being such a new type of business, one of the very first things I had to interact with when I joined Boxaroo was the inspectional services department in the city of Boston. These are the building inspectors who, have to sign off on businesses and make sure, yes, this place is safe. It's meeting all of the fire code and everything else for life safety. And
so is that worse than like going to the DMV? How painful is that experience?
I mean, I can tell you that I don't think there's a risk of going to the DMV and having my business shut down, right?
Yeah, that's very fair. So much higher stakes, yeah. So I guess it's more akin to like having like a food inspector come by.
Yeah, you could think of it as very much if people in the restaurant industry, bartending, that sort of thing. This is the equivalent of that. And it is it's not fun. I will tell you, we got we had a very interesting start because the every state is going to be different. In fact, every jurisdiction is different because it turns out in the US they're just like, states may be able to set codes, but at least in Massachusetts, it's every city is its own separate jurisdiction. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Right.
I do remember. No, because I know from my dad. So my dad's was electrician / is electrician in Chicago, and I know that the Boston electrical code is different than the surrounding cities' electrical code. Like in Boston, everything has to be run in conduit and properly grounded, whereas like when you get out to Western Mass, it's a lot. Western Mass is a white wire, and you drive a nail through the wall and your house burns down. So.
And on top of that, everything in the commercial sector is, a tier above what you might get in residential.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, everything has to be conduit for sure. I know that.
So really quick, along the lines of electricity, one of the escape rooms that I've gone to had a puzzle where there was like a magnetic ball and you had to like link arms and like a current would flow through you to complete a circuit to open up this one door. So how lethal is that for you to do? Like, could you get away with that?
That is a fantastic question. And, there's I mean, the simple answer is yes, if you do it smart, right? This is with most things, right? The obvious answer is if you want to be 100% safe, you should work with, your local inspector, the local authority to figure out, hey, will this work, or what special requirements do you have to sign off on this? If you're going to take the more practical route, if you want to do something like that, don't be an idiot. Make sure it's insanely low current, or don't do current, do, capacitive detection, right, on multiple different points. There's so many ways to do it. And, this is me having the engineering background. Many ways to do it that don't put people at risk, right?
It's almost like a magic trick, right? You can tell people there's current flowing, but in reality, it could be some like a safer technology like capacitive touch. It's just the illusion that gets you.
Like, there's, I mean, even to this day, there's tons of off-the-shelf devices that can help with things like this. I can think like makey. There's tons of hobbyist stuff that can be used for this, and you can find and repurpose that for something such as this. Although that has its own level of problems, which oh boy, I could talk about. But to start with, it's like there are ways to do this that are safe, and do those. Don't reinvent the wheel. And you can tell customers, it's electricity, and they'll usually shake their head and go, "Ah, yes, I understand." And as long as it didn't hurt them, and you have a very convincing waiver, it's fine.
So I guess from like along the lines of like you mentioned like RC and hobbyist stuff, like after all, Boxaroo is a business, so like I assume there's some kind of like trade-off between like, oh, the hobbyist stuff is cheaper, more readily available, but has its own issues versus like high-end commercial grade stuff is going to be really expensive. So I guess is there some optimization that goes in? Do you guys prefer using open source hobbyist stuff or?
I mean, setting aside open source because that is, a different bag of worms. Simply put,
Yep.
hobbyist stuff is good if you are prototyping or making one-off type things that will have a limited shelf life. But as we discovered, because we did start out using, Arduinos and Raspberries to very hobbyist level items, and those pins, that are controlling things maybe only work hundreds of times tops, and we need them to work thousands, 10,000s or more. So very, quickly it was like, wow, I have to replace this thing and fix it every week. This is dumb. Can we buy something that won't, break? And the answer is yes. And that's when we were introduced to PLCs and other industrial automation devices. And it turns out that's the way to do it.
So do you think that your guys' backgrounds as engineers has really helped you in creating escape rooms, puzzle rooms? Because I don't know if there's puzzle rooms across the United States, and I'm willing to bet not every one of those people are engineers. So I'm wondering what your perspective on that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain degree of like, if you want to make an escape room of any kind, right? You should look at what your background and your strengths are and play up on that. So we were engineers. We had theater experience. We leaned very hard into special effects and technology-based solves for puzzles, right? It's not just, oh, I put the, word in the lock. It's, oh, I, turned a dial and it magically made something pop open somewhere else. That was the thing we could figure out. If you've got people who, if somebody else is doing this and you have a team of people with like TV script writing experience, I better believe you can come out with a fantastic story that you can be accomplished and understood by players in an hour, and you want to build on that for your room, right? So
then in terms of,
I think our engineering background helped us do our rooms the way we wanted to. Yeah.
That's really cool. So then, and obviously you guys have grown since, so then like, have you, in terms of expanding, have you been focusing on adding more engineers and, leaning into that special effects, or have you guys, got like a TV script writer or like tried to make the team more well-rounded?
I think we sort of started by trying to shore up, build upon the things we could do. And there's a certain degree of just who was interested in helping out and what were their specialties, right? We had somebody, apply to work here, and, name is Bree, fantastic carpenter, had experience making signs commercially, and so could build just about anything we wanted. From any sort of base sketch or something, would be able to draft it up and then build it. And that's like, great, I don't have to worry as much about building those things. I can work on how are we going to get this electronic thing to work, this moving bit? Victor could focus on, well, how do we make the software for this room intuitive, or even like self-correcting and dynamic difficulty adjusting, things like that. And we got to then specialize more into those things. We hired someone to be an operator to help run the rooms, who is also a sound engineer for theatrical productions, and so has been helping us do like much more professional level recordings for all of our sound effects, narrations, pre-recorded hints. So it's, we haven't gone out necessarily looking for people, but everyone who comes to join us has some special talent, some hidden skill, and we try to be an environment where we can let that shine and that flourish.
So along these lines of hiring and just bringing on new team members, like obviously you do everything you can with the team you have at the time. But as you are getting on new team members, they each bring their own skills, but that also means there is less hats that everyone else has to wear. So what is that experience like for you, removing some of your hats and giving them to other people?
Ooh, yeah. No, genuinely, that has been something I've been struggling with, especially, a certain degree over the pandemic. We have had a lot of turnover, as, most everyone has. We tried to keep as many people, as many spots open for people as we could. Not everyone could come back for one reason or another. And, that sucks. We were a very tight-knit, we still are a very tight-knit group, tight-knit team here. And it hurts losing, people to circumstances such as that. But, that said, I don't have a background in business. I don't have necessarily the experience leading something like this. So I like to do things, and I like to learn by doing. So having to take a step back and say, hey, you actually have a ton of operational experience because you've run restaurants before, I think I would like to tap into that, and gonna slowly ask you to take on some of the things I've been doing, like the weekly schedule and, time tracking and stuff like that, and working with people on that. And, there's a part of it is like, oh, is it going to be the way I was doing it? They're going to do it their way. How do I feel about that? And I think I'm starting to realize at this point, it's like, well, if I want the company to grow and get better, I have to let go a little bit. I can't do everything at the stage we're at, much less if we want to grow. So yeah, it's been a learning experience to let go and to trust other people to do things.
Yeah, I feel like there's very much, especially if you are used to building stuff on your own, there's so much learning and growing that you do on your own that doesn't translate to once you have a larger group of people. And letting that almost intuition, that second nature go in order to grow the beast that is a creature more than just yourself can be hard. It can almost feel non-intuitive sometimes because it just feels so alien from your own experiences. But at the same time, like, this is what has to happen.
For sure. In some ways, a thing I picked up a while ago before the pandemic happened and Boxaroo was on a very good upswing, having opened our third room. It was like, okay, we need to sort of systematize everything. And ideally, if I'm take a week off for vacation, God forbid I were to get hit by a lottery ticket, that sort of thing, I would just be able to, things could still go on without me, as the case may be. So, it's how do I let other people, become cogs in this machine that we're building, right? Like, I trust all the people to help with the build side of things. At the time, I was still learning to let go of the operational side of things in terms of how do we trust not just that everyone here can do their thing right, but how can I trust that the person I'm entrusting to design the system, the operations manual, the training schedule and procedures, and the hiring process that will spin up and go in a way that represents the Boxer I want it to be, right? And having to reinvent that every time things change. What we're looking for now is very different than what we were looking for 2 years ago before the pandemic happened.
That's fair. So I guess like in terms of like what is currently, I guess, like the trajectory you want to take Boxaroo on? Is it to, open get a couple more stores, develop like more of the online presence? Like what if, excluding the pandemic, where would you like to see the company go?
Right. What comes next is a great question. And fundamentally, I want Boxer to grow. Specifically, I want more escape rooms. I want more of the rooms we produce and the stories we tell in them to exist. At our current location, we are full up on space, right? We have built out the rooms we can, where we can build them. And, the next step on that would have been, hey, let's get more space and do this. Obviously, a pandemic happened, and it's like, well, we'll have to figure out what comes next now. I think it is still, my dream is let's find more space here, second location, something, and let's produce some more escape rooms. We have so many good ideas in our back pocket that we would love to get out there. At the same time, the realistic thing is, hey, to really make an escape room to the quality that we want and to give the value that people expect, it costs a lot of money. It is not a small investment in money or time or people and resources. So if we can't do that right now with the circumstances we have, what is something smaller that we can find to do? And that was really where our online puzzle hunt, Colby's Curious Cook-Off, came from. And at the same time, we might revisit something in that form factor. We might do something in a different form factor that's more physical, but play at home. Those are really like the two build another escape room, the non-location based ones, if I would say that.
I feel like in some ways this ties into the same kind of challenges as scaling in terms of like I was watching some like biopic on the founding of McDonald's, and the people who started the original business had very strong concerns about making sure that the quality was good, that everything was up to their standards. And then the person who was interested in transforming it into more of a franchise business was like, how can we operationalize this as efficiently as possible to make this a money-making machine? And there is some kind of push and pull between wanting your vision of a specific type of business entity versus wanting something to become a profit-generating machine. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is definitely the, I would politely say, the tug of war between like, what does this business have to become, right? Obviously, it's a business. We need to make profits. We need to be profitable. That's the only way to survive. But at the same time, right, for most of us, this is a community. It's a labor of love. It's something we like doing and happen to also get paid for, right? It's a nice creative outlet for so many people here. So, I don't, Boxer becoming, 40 franchises in a year and a half around the, US, and they're all, kind of crappy, like some escape room chains. I don't think that's the way for us, right? We're not out to be the next McDonald's or the next, huge chain of things, right? I think we have good, solid quality and deliver a very unique experience. And I'd like to keep doing that. I'd like to do that more than we currently have. What we have is great. I think we can do more and do better. And that will make us, like from the business side, more profitable and, more durable and more world renowned. So
I think it's really important that when you mention scaling, maintaining quality, it reminds me of like one of my favorite facts in history is what happened to KFC when Colonel Sanders sold it originally. So he Colonel Sanders makes the first KFC, and like the original gravy had like 26 like different spices in it, and now KFC's gravy has like 4 in it or something. And by the time that he died, he hated KFC, and he would go into different KFCs and rant about how terrible it is and could try to get people to leave. So like it's like one of those things about like trying to grow and maintain quality is actually something that's really important.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
In-N-Out is a business where it's not franchise; it's entirely owned by In-N-Out, and quality's pretty consistent. And coming from California, damn, I like for the cost value, I think it's pretty worth it. But actually, in the Philippines, the best KFC I ever had was in the Philippines, where they had chickens just in the back. So it was as fresh as you can possibly go. It was amazingly fresh. Oh yeah, but you can't really do that in the United States. So yeah. But like I know there's one brewery in the area who was making cider where they decided to shut down because they felt like the only way for their business to continue existing in the current environment was for them to scale in a way that would decrease the quality of their product. And they didn't want to make that jump, so they decided to close down the business and end it with their values intact. And I can respect that. Like, that's a hard decision, but it's very much one I can respect.
It also led me to buy up like all the remaining cider I could.
I mean, it's definitely a way to go out. If in the escape room, it's the tried and true marketing technique of, hey, we're retiring this room at this time, and then suddenly it's booked out through your closing date, and you're like, I guess I could run it for a little bit longer. We have never at this point replaced a room. Most escape rooms in the Boston area, most of the independent ones haven't replaced rooms like that. And that's kind of just part of it, of life now. But yeah, for me anyway, the idea of wanting to, if something were to, like when I started this, a lot of us were, it's like, yep, there's that one guy, he's got his escape room and he's running it, 24/7, and it's just him. And turns out that's a great way to maybe make a lot of money and a great way to burn yourself out. So, if you want to scale it, you got to hire people to help, take shifts, run other things, then you run the other parts of the business. But at the same time, you can also still keep it small, right? This is a kind of a niche industry where, at least right now, you could just be a small company. You could just have the 1 or 2 locations. You could have the 3 to 6 rooms, be decently profitable, and, keep that going for a while. So there is some balance where you wouldn't have to necessarily say, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, I guess we better stop here.
So what do your hours look like now versus when you started out with just the 2 of you?
Well, early on, it was, all the time. There were definitely days. This is my favorite Boston part. I would get to work before 10 a.m. No sun is up because it's Boston in the winter. I work in a basement. There's no sunlight down there, no windows. In fact, one of our rooms is in an old bank vault. There's definitely no sunlight there. And, I leave like 6, 7, 8 p.m. Even if I got out on an early day at 4 o'clock, there's no sun. So, yeah. I worked basically in some ways all the time. My dad definitely jokingly said, look, if you're going to start a business, you're going to be working 60 to 80 hours a week. And that's just how it goes. So good luck. And yeah, turns out he was right about that. Nowadays, it's still, maybe 60 hours a week, especially on a busy week. But, my priorities have shifted. I'm running the rooms less. I'm entrusting the people we're hiring to do that. And I'm focusing more on, hey, how do we sell to these groups that are looking to do special bookings? How do we, plan a large event for this corporate client that we could run for them? How do I get grant money to help fill some gaps because of COVID? The reality of it is, I in many ways I'm doing more CEO work and less of the actual running of the rooms and less of the design and the build type thing, which I am still really passionate about and I want to get back to. We're just not quite at the stage yet.
That's fair. So I guess, in the future, then, would you be looking to, have someone that does operations full time, so you could go back to being like the head of the designing the puzzles?
Yeah, I would say like that's kind of the direction I'm hoping things head is training people up now to be able to manage all of the day-to-day operations. And I'm a bit of a weird creature. I do like doing all of it at Boxaroo. I love running rooms for customers because it lets me actually see the rubber hit the road. I get to see their faces and see the reactions, and that is extremely rewarding. It's like doing a live theater production where you're like actually getting to see the magic happen and getting the feedback from the audience. That is huge to me. But I also don't want to do that all the time. I want to design and I want to build. So, in a certain way, I think the ideal situation is slowly spin up the different parts of it, get people trained to run the operation side of thing. And I'll get to, we're still a small team, right? We don't even have 10 people right now. So I still have to help out with that. But, we'll get people to deal with that. Maybe somebody will come along who's, got a huge interest in the business side of things and bookkeeping or something. I don't know. And that can become a part of that. And then suddenly it's like, oh, now I can check in on that, but I can still focus on the design and product development side of things that, has been stagnant for a while.
Yeah, that honestly, from the stories I've heard and read, that isn't necessarily uncommon. Like there are plenty of companies where the founders eventually end up hiring a CEO and then they just focus on what they are most passionate about. So and some of those companies are doing quite well, but it's by no means like there are a lot more paths in making a business run than I think are like commonly told, and honestly, a lot of this is just like not well known at all.
No, definitely not. And like I've, tried reading, I will tell you, my number one frustration is the number of times I've tried to find a book on how to run or grow a business, and every single one I've picked up focuses on a tech-based startup. And let me tell you what Boxaroo is not.
But you have the magic, you said, all the special effects.
Yes. And, yeah, I mean, it turns out, right, like just because we have tech, it doesn't mean we're a startup either. And we're not trying to act like one. So it's, that whole mindset annoys me so much because it in many ways pollutes things. It's like, no, I would just like to know how to run and grow my, small to medium sized business. Where are the books on this? Right. And it's, that has been a struggle. If anyone has any good books out there, I would love to hear them.
So we aren't sponsored by them. No sponsorship at all.
That's fair.
But what I
Not yet.
found actually, well, not yet.
Except Masterclass will never.
Oh no, that last episode. So what I've actually found really valuable, because I've been trying, not succeeding, but trying to start my own business this past year. But what I've found really helpful is our communities of other small business owners and entrepreneurs. So there is one that I'm part of called Trends, where, like, honestly, the newsletter is fine, but what's a lot more valuable is the community, where there's a lot of events, you can talk to a lot of people about any level of specific question. Like, we have people talking about like M&A, like mergers and acquisitions at a small scale. We have people talking about like just their landing pages, doing marketing for like very, very small companies. And there's a wide variety of people in the group, so it's really easy to find the information you have to find, that you want found. And I've always been able to get my questions answered. So again, this is not sponsored at all. It's just I've had a positive experience with them, and I found that a community can be a lot more valuable than a book, because you can have an ongoing conversation and ask questions, which you can't really ask a book questions, or you can, but the book is just going to be a book. Yeah, so that's my experience.
Turns out, and to that end, I will say the escape room community, and specifically the owner community, is fantastic. Like, there is a huge, it's funny because you think, oh, most businesses in the same, industry, right? If you got two coffee shops, surely they're competing, right? But here's the thing: people can only do an escape room once. Unless you're that guy who's going to bring multiple different dates to the same room, which we have had. And I'm, if you ask any escape room owner, they will probably tell you the same story. So yeah, we do kind of all have to work together. And there's a sense of, if all escape rooms are good quality, more people want to come do them, and they will do, your 3 rooms, go down the street and do their 4 rooms, and keep going. So, and then spread the word to their friends about what to do. So, and most owners, especially like New England area, is great. There's a ton of independent owners here, and we've got our Facebook group, and we chat and talk and go around and visit each other. Before the pandemic, we would do meetups, and there'd be like 40 of us there, and it's fun. It's great seeing these like-minded people. At the same time, a lot of us are also like, yeah, how the heck do we grow this business? And so it's like, it would be nice to learn from the wisdom of others who have experience doing other things, and there's always that, oh, if I could just figure out how to make this business work, then I would do it. And, maybe you wouldn't necessarily share that. That's always my feeling, is like, yeah, we're all friendly and we will, talk shop and stuff. But if we had some deep secret to, the success of business, probably we would just keep that to ourselves, or write a book. I don't know.
Well, so one thing I have found is that for trade secrets, oh yeah, no one's gonna tell you shit. But for general, like, for, I guess, intro level knowledge, like non-trade specific knowledge, but just how to be broadly successful, which there's so much fucking shit to learn for that. I found that people are pretty open about that, because building that relationship of being someone who is helpful, who can give advice, who is reliable to turn to, that reputation is much more valuable than the information you gave away. So that's at least what I've found from the people I've tried to get answers from.
I mean, I think that's fairly accurate. Like, what was it? Our third when did we interview Jared? Was that our second episode? Mm-hmm. Right. So in the beginning of the pandemic, Jared, so Jared Slotin is our friend who is a bartender now, a bar consultant at the Craigie on Main. He through Patron, there was class is called Academy Patron, and he did spreadsheets for bars, and he covered how to do that in the beginning of the pandemic for bars that were struggling. So I could see what you're saying, where there's definitely people are very willing to spread that base knowledge that everyone needs to be successful.
No, for sure. And I do remember that episode, and I remember, actually taking the how to mix drinks class from Jared during college. So that's fantastic. And there's a certain sense of when other owners come to visit, it's like, hey, you played the room. Do you want to see the behind the scenes? And we get to talk shop. And there's a certain, again, level of a rising tide will lift all boats, right? If we're talking tech and it's like, oh, we're using this, and someone's like, oh, we use Arduino. It's like, oh yeah, we had the problem where that kept burning out, and they're like, oh, well, what would you recommend instead? And it's like, look into stuff like this. We're not giving away our trade secrets. We're not sharing our code with anyone, but the idea of, hey, this is the tool you'll probably want to use. It's been pretty helpful.
I think it also, and since you also took like the bartending class under Jared, I think, one commonality we all have is it's that MIT spirit. Like, yes, when you're at the top of your field and you're doing maybe like publications, you're not going to like necessarily give away like what gives you the edge, but you also want to be the best of the best, right? So you want to bring up people around you and be collaborative as much as you can.
Oh, for sure. There's so much more to be gained by being collaborative than there is by being competitive necessarily, right? And ultimately, it's like, I really feel, especially in escape rooms where, you are limited on the number of times a customer is coming back, right? You are going to have to play nice with people, and it really helps you to be, have good networking and to be, a positive experience, right? If I, liked someone's escape room, I will recommend it to them because I think they will enjoy it, right? And if it's a bad escape room experience, you don't want to send them there because then they might be like, hey, escape rooms aren't great. So, it is a very tight-knit spirit.
So touching on that, so what I'm thinking right now is that in some ways an escape room is like a hybrid. No, follow me with this. It's a hybrid between like a bar and a washing machine, in that it is cultivating an experience, but it's not like you buy you don't buy a washing machine every single day or every single week. You buy a washing machine until it's time to get a new one. So how do you deal? How do you make that kind of industry work? Like how frequently? How do you decide when to make a new washing machine, so to say, make a new escape room?
No, I mean, that's a great question. And the simple answer is, when we started out, it was like, oh, how, big question is, how long do we run these rooms for? And because, in my experience, this industry, at least in the United States, is less than a decade old, right? The answer is nobody knows. When I started, the common wisdom was like, oh, you're going to get 1, maybe 2 years out of it. We've had the Magician study for 5 years now. And I don't think it's in danger of going away. The simple answer is it depends, right? Turns out Boston is great because it's a huge metropolitan area. It has a lot of college kids, which is a transient population that's going to come and go. So cheers to that. And like we try to bring a lot of college kids in. It's like, hey, MIT people, we have the puzzle heavy room that's going to tax your minds, and they still stomp it anyway. That's how it goes. We've got more artistically inclined ones. It's like, hey, Emerson and Suffolk kids come in and experience this room, and it's they're also literally right on our doorstep in this case. Just down the block from us, there's a new Suffolk University dorm. So whenever things return to normal and there's college kids right there, I sure hope we get a lot of them coming over to do the escape room. Like personally, I don't know when we're going to replace these rooms. And that's why I know the next step is, hey, we have to go find more space and produce more experiences, because all of our fans who played all three and love them have to come back and do more. And they keep asking us, when is more stuff going to come out?
So you've maintained, I'm kind of surprised in a positive way that you've been able to keep the same room for 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, that is not something that I would have expected, and that's awesome. From a business side, has the finances been like roughly the same throughout, or has it, like, how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. When we had one room, we were not making enough money to cover things. When we had two rooms, we were not making enough money to cover things. But it was like it was more than one room, but not quite double. And then we opened our third room and things took off. It wasn't just like doubled, it was more than that. People loved it. We had a huge explosion of stuff. And that was September 2019. So not even 6 months later.
Damn.
Yeah. We opened Storyteller's Secret, which was a phenomenal room. Well, is a phenomenal room. And will be again. And we got a huge ton of recognition. We kept getting more people coming out. Business was picking up, and then COVID happened, and here we are.
So I was gonna say, in terms of like it growing, is there also? I just wonder, is there like initial spike when you open like a new room? Is there kind of like a grand opening, or like is there like a lot of excitement? I'm just
mailing list.
Mailing list.
Oh, so maybe we kind of do this wrong. We tend to do like the soft open where it's like, yeah, you just look at our website and suddenly there's this new room you can book. No grand announcement. And it turns out, yeah, we have a lot of kinks to work out. So we are just, book the room, come and do it. It's open limited times per week because we need to spend, 4 days a week fixing it and improving on it. In little ways, nothing like hugely shifting. So, those people who played first still are getting the full experience, just maybe without all the bells and whistles. Or if that thing breaks, we're really sorry. But, we fix it after that. And then we do the grand, opening announcement. We tend to get a little bit of a spike, like maybe when that happens, send out to the mailing list announcing the thing. I would say that the biggest recognition is like after the biggest bump is after some sort of recognition. So a review comes out, that's, they're usually pretty glowing and we always appreciate that. Award thing happens and we place well with that. Those go a long way. Really the weird thing is since reopening for, March of this year was when escape rooms finally got the green light to reopen in Boston. Since we've been able to do that, people have just kept coming. We haven't had to do anything and people just keep coming. Everyone cannot wait to get out and do anything, it turns out.
That is like a business owner's dream, to like have to do no marketing and just everyone come inbound because the demand is so high. But also, like, I can completely understand because a year inside, like, I want to escape this room so that I can escape a different room. Yeah, that completely makes sense to me.
I was also gonna say, I wonder if there's just like the popularity, not just popularity, but also the exposure of escape rooms are increasing. Because I know, for example, my girlfriend and I, one of the shows we really like is Schitt's Creek, and one of the characters, and that's like a super popular show on Netflix, and Patrick in the show loves escape rooms. Like that's like, yep. And then the magician I follow, and I know you, Chris Ramsey, like he has done virtual escape the room. So I just wonder if it's just exploding in popularity now.
It's starting out again. It was the terrible thing of like, oh, I don't just have to like get the people. I don't have to just advertise to people to say, hey, come do my thing. I also have to explain to everyone, this is what an escape room is, and this is why you want to do it, right? And I still think like maybe the number of people in the US who know what an escape room is, maybe 10%, and not many of them have, like maybe half of that has done it. Something in that ratio where it's like, yeah, there's no huge saturation yet, even on what the concept of an escape room is. So I do appreciate that it's starting to really enter pop culture, and the awareness of what an escape room is getting out there. So definitely, honestly, that is probably part of it. Maybe right around the time we were opening that third room, it was starting to pick up. I remember there was that, Good Place episode that aired right around then. It's like things kept going up from there. Who knows?
I know after Queen's Gambit came out, chess.com, light chess, a lot of these chess websites just got a huge sudden influx of new players. So it's wild to see how many factors outside of business owners' control can just massively change both the demand and the awareness that of different opportunities. Like the mainstreaming of different things like escape rooms means that these businesses, which once were niche, are now like are mainstream. So it's like, I imagine it's great for you, but at the same time, it's not at all within your control. So how do you feel about like previous experiences trying to market your business versus now it's just coming?
In many ways, I think I definitely prefer it now. And I'm not just saying that from the rosy perspective of, oh, we're just open again and I'm happy so many people are coming out. I think it really saying a lot that people are coming out in kind of droves. Like we have been booking out more slots than ever before, even in our best months before. I think it's also getting to the point now where escape rooms aren't, because also when it started, you had people comparing it to Saw or horror movies related to that. Maybe it's okay that Escape Room, the movie, came out and now we're getting Escape Room 2, whatever the subtitle is, Tournament of Champions. That's what it is. And so, it's like, okay, it's starting to get a little more mainstream, but we're also getting away from the horror death aspect because, that would be bad, and bad things have happened with escape rooms before. January. There was, start of one year, there was, the biggest escape room news was there was a fire in an escape room in Poland that killed 5 teenagers.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So it's, this is one of those industries where actually, you could have bad news and bad publicity. And, we had a few people calling asking like, hey, is this safe? And we get to be like, we're safe because we don't lock you in. And, the subtext there is because we talked to the fire department and they told us not to. So, it's, and again, this ties back to the, hey, work with, the inspectional services, make sure you are pulling your permits and getting approved for this stuff because it's important, right? Safety is paramount to this. So, I'm glad we're at today where people are just coming, people are looking to have a good time. We're not battling any of that negative stigma from before and not having to educate as many people about this is what an escape room is. So, I'm glad, like, business wise, we are where we are. Obviously, I wish we could have skipped the whole pandemic thing to get here, but
yeah.
It's interesting too, like how having to deal with that negative stigma dissipating, because it also reminds me of like, I like playing Dungeons and Dragons, and like, back in the 70s it was, this is satanic,
Devil worship.
Yeah, and now it's like you see it on Stranger Things, and now you have popular people playing it, are celebrities. Also, like I play like Magic too, and you have like NFL players playing it. Post Malone plays
Post
Magic.
Malone.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. Just off screen from here is all of the Magic decks that I haven't cleaned up, by the way. So,
Is it Commander? Is it a
lots of Commander, some Canadian Highlander, some packs of Jumpstart. It's kind of a mess. Yeah.
So as someone who doesn't play Magic, none of these terms mean anything to me. And having been explained these terms by Tyler before, I think we're not going to explain them right now
No.
how in detail they are. But Magic card game, and these are all different ways of playing the card game. Is that generally the case?
I would say it's like most people have like regular playing, like 52 playing cards. The different things we're describing is like you can play solitaire, you can play poker, you can play rummy, just same cards but different formats.
That's a good way to explain it. The other one would be it's like, if your baseball trading cards could also be used in a game, right? You're collecting these and you can do things with them. So, yeah.
Speaking of that, I know that they can sell for a shit ton of money.
Yes, that is. Look, the important takeaway here is it's very important to have hobbies outside of your work and things you're interested in. Especially when you're going to be trapped in a room for over a year, that is not the one you want to escape from.
Directly on those lines of the other hobbies, outside of your business, like what kind of life do you live? What kind of because I know early on your entire life was this business, but now that you have a bit more flexibility, what is your day-to-day like outside of work?
Yeah, it's definitely been kind of nice being my own boss in a sense of like, yeah, we have these set hours, but otherwise I'm not having to, show up or punch a clock. I do have the flexibility to decide what I'm doing here. So, I get to, wake up when I need to wake up, make a nice breakfast for myself and my partner. And, we get to go about the rest of our day. I'll go into the office sometimes to, work on other stuff, to run rooms. Sometimes I'll work from home doing, spreadsheets and bookkeeping, responding to sales emails, or just in this case, working around the house. We recently moved into this place and it needs a lot of work. So, yeah.
I was going to say, did you buy then? Because, usually if a place needs work and you're renting, you're like, well, the landlord could do that. But I assume you bought if you're talking about doing it yourself.
Yes, earlier this year, we bought a house and moved in. Hilariously, the day we closed on this house, we closed at say 11:30 in the morning. 11:35, I get an email from the building inspector being like, hey, we haven't been by in a while. We need to inspect your place for business. And that was about a week before we were allowed to reopen. So I was like, oh boy, work and life are about to pick up at the same time.
Yeah, I remember when I first moved here and the washing machine was very old. It was so old that we didn't know where the water went. We thought the water was just going straight into the gutter, but it didn't. So the first time we washed our washing machine, our basement was flooded. And it didn't have, how you would say, a vent or any way of getting. So we went to Home Depot, bought a shop vac, and then slowly like vacuumed it up, poured it outside, vacuumed it up. And yeah, that was a time. There's a lot that you don't necessarily realize.
Yeah.
And you didn't keep that washer? You didn't want to repeat over and over again?
No, just the once, right? It's like an escape room. It's funny. We literally had a plumber in earlier today for washing machine related issues. And so it's like, oh yeah, huh. In many ways, there's like a certain overlap where it's like, yeah, I've had to paint and finish stuff. And, I'm getting to do some of that here for Boxaroo. skills from Boxer transferring to real life, and also dealing with contractors, which was something I picked up on the job. Having to do that a lot for your own home sure makes a difference.
Yeah, I'm thankful. So like I mentioned, my dad was / is electrician. He now flips houses, so I'm also familiar from talking to him, like dealing with contractors.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, turns out there's a skill to it. It's a learned skill. You're not going to learn that in school or anything. So yeah.
I will say, I wish I remembered the name of the business because I liked it so much that this is another one that I would hype without any like advertisement. But
We should get them to sponsor us.
They're but like I had gutter cleaning done like a few weeks ago, and that was the most pain-free experience I've ever had. I just told them, they showed up, knocked my door, said, "Hey, I'm gonna do it," and then like 20 minutes later, they're like, "Hey, I did it." Give them the money and bye. And that was just, there was no upselling. It was just like very affordable, done, and really pleasant. And that is not always the case. If you have worked with contractors before, it is very rarely the case that goes that easily. And you're nodding your head. What has been some of your experiences?
I mean, like in house related stuff, it's simply been like, having to call extra times to figure out when things are actually scheduled for, right? Like, oh yeah, someone will be by next week. It's like, well, hang on. A week is a long time, right? That's 5 whole days, and I have stuff to do. So, it's even worse than cable sometimes. But like for, the escape room side of things, it's big, there's so many annoying factors, especially in our case where, we have to hire them to do it, but they, contracting company has to submit plans and get approval from, fire department, building and inspectional services. We're, talking huge chunks of money here, and it's like, yeah, but hang on, your contract says you would do this, and yet you're telling me you haven't actually gotten approval yet, and even then, it still has to pass inspection, and you want me to pay what? So, we get stuck in weird loops like that where they're like, well, we've done the work, we need to be paid. And it's like, well, yeah, but you haven't passed inspection, so your work doesn't mean anything yet. And of course the city of Boston doesn't answer to anyone. So, it's a weird triangle.
They answer to themselves.
I wouldn't even go that far.
That's very, very fair.
I was gonna say, if they answer to themselves, the Green Line wouldn't have been crashing over and over again.
For those who don't know, the Green Line is one of the subways in Boston.
It's the worst subway next to the Silver Line.
Yeah. So,
I mean, you ask, is the Green Line on fire? And the website just says, probably. God, yeah, right. The two reasons we get people late the most are they can't find parking and my train got stuck, right? And then third behind that is my Uber driver's dumb. So take that as you will. But yeah, it's a fun city to be in.
Well, I thought you enjoyed Boston. I thought like Boston was a great home.
Well, so like fundamentally, I'm ragging on them, but we do, we are working with the city, and I think they are doing important things, right? Like this is an acceptable level of bureaucracy in my mind, right? It's like strictly speaking, serving an important function. Especially you look elsewhere, disasters have happened. And the corners some companies cut in certain places, right? You're like, well, hang on. It sucks to feel like, hey, I jumped through all the right hoops and had to open 6 months later than you did, and you just did whatever. But there's a certain degree of like, hey, if there's a crackdown happening, we did all the right things and we're not going to get busted for it. So
yeah, I think there's a difficult push and pull between like, you want to make sure that there are systems in place to make sure things are safe, but you also want to make sure there's not so much over the top bureaucracy that nothing can happen without paying tons of money to pass all the inspections and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely a hard juggling act, and I don't envy anyone who has to try and balance that from a legislative perspective, because no matter what, you don't make people upset.
I mean, there's a certain degree of the answer is just hire more people to do it, right? And obviously that's going to be, challenging, because, this is the worst job of, you have to be like, a narc or an inspector or whatever you want to call it. And then, you also have to work for the government. That's probably the two most hated parts of a job, right? But, they serve a hugely important function, right? In keeping shady or dangerous businesses from existing. So, I respect what they do, and especially, I think we're super lucky. The inspector who is in our region also plays escape rooms. And so
that's awesome.
He shows up at our places like, oh, I know what this is. I know what you're doing. I need you to do these things. And that's always been pretty, honestly, that's good. At least we have someone who understands this and isn't going say I'm sorry, you want to do what?
Yeah.
So, it's, I, hear many business owners talking about how much they hate having to do this stuff. I hate certain parts of it, but fundamentally I appreciate that the system is there.
Touching on that though, how much of the relationships that you've built do you attribute to your own success in this space?
I mean, to a certain degree, it has to be all of them, right? Every, aspect of working with customers to, reaching out to customers to making sure they're having the best time possible, to working with the contractors and, the connections there, having to call back the architect to be like, hey, we now have to get this other permit process work. You were great last time. Can you help us out here? There's a certain degree of it's we're not trying to burn any bridges with anything here, because we're in it for the long haul. It's how can we make sure everyone has the best experience, right? I think it's not just Boxaroo isn't just a transactional company. It is really experiential, and to a certain degree, that means it's based on the relationship between customer, client, contractor, and us.
And I feel since you're taking it from this long-term perspective, it gets easier also with time, right? Once you have, like you just said, we used this architect previously, so now you don't have to hunt through the list of all the architects and know who's going to be sketchy. You have someone to rely on, and if they're not in the industry or they're busy, they're going to refer you to someone else.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely part of it. So it's
to go in a slightly different direction. Something I'm curious about, and a common question we've asked all of our past guests, is what have been the highs, the highest high, lowest low of your time working in escape rooms?
It might not be a different direction. The low might be dealing with the city.
Well, very early on when I joined, some things were not in order permit wise, and we were shut down for a period of time. That was pretty low. Technically, the lowest low would have been I had a very fond memory of a day when we needed a third-party contractor, not the one we had hired to do some fire alarm work, but a third party that they had to interact with was coming in. And it was a god-awful shit show. That person arrived late. Our contact at the fire alarm company had already left because he was like, well, they're late. We can't do the thing. And it's I'm sure he's going to be here. And he noped out. And that was my third day that week, having to be in before 7 a.m. and out after 10 p.m. So I was completely ragged. I'd say that is probably the lowest point for me, was like, and you're telling me the work can't get done, and I have, the person in front of me and the other party bickering over the phone, and it's like, can somebody just do their job? And I'm powerless to do it because, I'm not a licensed contractor. I can't, somebody else has to do it, right? On the other hand, the highest high, right? Like the moments where we get to open the third room and we have people doing it, I think actually one of my favorite times of year is the weekend of the MIT Mystery Hunt, when so many puzzle enthusiasts are coming in, and we book out a lot of rooms that, the Friday before and the at the end of the weekend afterwards. And these are all people who love puzzles, have done hundreds of escape rooms. They always beat our records for whatever the room is, but they still take time to say how fantastic they loved all of it. That, the reward and the feedback from that is probably some of the most heartfelt. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, it's a testament to what you're saying earlier, like, what you want to be that sets you apart from other escape rooms is the quality. You leaning into the special effects, and all that.
Yeah, no, I think getting the feedback that people love that really makes it all worth it.
Would you say that is what you primarily are doing this for, to create these experiences and get that like positive feedback, like, yes, this experience you made for me was amazing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of why I wanted to get into it. I wanted to make cool things and have people enjoy them. Now it's, that's how it started. It's still, I want that, but now it's also the subtext of, I want this business to exist and like keep supporting the employees who are here and, make money to grow, but also like build a good business side to the community. It's the difference between, I wanted to start being an engineer and building things and making things, and now I kind of have to be a CEO and I want to build the company. So
your motivation has kind of changed with the needs of the company then?
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
So one thing that I definitely knew for myself, and I wasn't alone in this, is back in college, I was very much in the, if you build it, I think I mentioned exactly this line last time. If you build it right, they'll just come. You just build a good product and the people will come. And I discounted any like business perspective because it seemed not grounded in what was important. So as someone who has worn both hats, how would you communicate to your past self the importance of what you're doing now?
I mean, I have been on both sides of that fence where it's like, oh, let's just do it. Let's, spend the extra money, spend the extra time, just make it awesome and people will love it. And at the same time, it's like, hey, we need to get this open and we need to get it done now. Just put the things down, call it good. It doesn't have to be perfect, and just get it out the door. And then also the third head of, oh crap, I've made this thing. Now I have to get people in the door. Oh, and I have to brag about it and sell it and actually talk myself up. I am not a natural born salesman. And so it's having to learn how to do that has been a fun part of this experience. But, fundamentally, essentially if I were to go back and tell myself, it's like, hey, perhaps brag a bit more about it and actually try and sell it a bit, right? Like, that's been the hardest part for me. You're going to have to sell rooms.
That's just kind of the natural, I'd say the natural personality of engineers. Engineers tend to be on the more humble side. I think, that's kind of why in undergrad, there was definitely, back before I appreciated the business side of it, certain project would be like, oh, we're getting people from the business school at MIT on this project. And I'd just be like, and what are they going to contribute? Like,
I think without the experience, it's hard to get a full appreciation of what really goes into making a self-sustaining entity. Like, it's not easy building a product, building an experience. It's not easy building something per se, but it's also not easy making it so that that thing can continue to exist.
Yeah.
It can be provided to more than one person. And everything that goes into making it so that this can actually continue, which oftentimes means more people, which means you need to pay these people, which means it needs to bring in money to be able to pay these people.
Right.
Like it's almost an inevitable consequence that there needs to be some business understanding in order to make the product dreams sustainable and scalable.
There's a certain degree of it's like you have to have somebody who is going to do like sort of the grunt labor, and then you have to have someone who's going to do even more of the work. And there might be a dog barking outside, and I apologize if that's coming through. Right? Somebody explained this as actually. So one resource I did find useful was the SCORE is a program for executives who give advice to other business people, and there happens to be one in Boston. I went to a couple of times, in the before times when you could actually meet in person with people. And, he explained it as there's like 15 an hour jobs, 50 an hour jobs, and 150 per hour jobs. And you have to hire the people to do the lower stuff so you can do the higher stuff, right? And that's one way to grow the business. And it's kind of learning that and then actually trying to apply it, two completely different things, but has been a little bit more instrumental in how do we raise this to the next level of a business, not just a product or an escape room experience.
Then I guess just one final question to kind of wrap things up. For people who might have heard of escape rooms but had never considered making their own, what kind of advice would you give to them to start this as a business that they can continue doing?
If you want to do this as a business, definitely think about it. Lots of us people who want to do escape rooms are like, I've played a bunch and I think I can make one, or I have a really great idea for one. And that's great. I'm sure you have a great idea for one room. How is one room going to pay for the rent that you need for that space to do it? How is it going to pay for the supplies you had to buy to set it up? How is it going to pay the wages for somebody to run it when you want to take a day off, right? And, that's the business side of thinking about it. If you've got one great idea, do you have two? Do you have four? Who's going to build it for you? Are you going to do everything? It's think about the entire picture, not just the product, right? I was focused on building the room at first, and Victor was focusing on like not just programming it, but then also later, how do we make the best booking site for our webpage, which is also entirely proprietary. We haven't sold out to another, one of any standard number of e-commerce platforms like that. So that's actually pretty cool too.
It's really interesting that compared to a lot of the other people we've interviewed, Sean was my dance teacher, Jared being a bartender. Those are all very low capital initial passions you're going to start up. And so I think it's really important that what you were saying there is that when you're going to pursue a passion that's such a high initial capital investment, you really do have to consider the entire picture and getting that revenue stream. Whereas if you're taking your passion is much lower capital, a much lower capital investment in the beginning, you can more just jump into it, doing the creative side of it.
And there's also sort of the long-termness of this, right? Like, we had to rent we've been in the place for 6 years that we started out leasing. If you're going to build an escape room, you want that thing to last as long as possible, right? I assume if you are, working as a bartender, you could move to a different bar. It's pretty hard for me to move this escape room to that space without a lot more cost, right? So, in some ways it's like, well, I have this idea for the product. I also have to build the entire business around it. So definitely think more holistically than just what do I want customers to feel in the room. That's not to say ignore that, because that is hugely important. But if you want to get started, there's more than that. And second, reach out to the community of business owners. There's some hugely awesome things, awesome people. There's a convention coming up later this month online by, room escape artists, a review blog, and just champions of the escape room industry in general. So there are huge resources to learn so much more about how to do escape rooms than when I was starting out. So learn from people who've been there before you.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Before we let you go, do you want to just mention what your website is, any socials, any information you want to say to market yourself?
Absolutely. So we're Boxaroo. I like to say we're Boston's best escape room. Our website is boxaroo.me. And we also have an online puzzle hunt called Colby's Curious Cook-Off at curiouscookoff.com. Yeah. And so you can check us out there or on Facebook at Boxaroo Boston.
And I guess one quick question for those who do follow up on this, is there a recommended order for the escape the rooms?
Ooh. I would say it is either chronologically, which is Mystery of the Magician Study, Conundrum Museum, Storyteller Secret, or immersiveness increasing, which would be Conundrum Museum first, Magician Study second, and the Storyteller Secret third.
Thanks. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Hopefully a lot more. I mean, you're already pretty booked. Hopefully plenty more people come your way. And because I would agree that I think Boxaroo is definitely the best in Boston. So best of luck for your future, and was wonderful talking to you.
It was wonderful talking to the both of you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Have a good night.
Take care.
That's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a comment.
Or gave us a personal loan.
Or maybe just a coupon for now.
I did take after my dad in that way.